We learned about arrays, and they didn't seem very useful at the time. Here's where they become useful, and we're going to learn about our first loop. This is a for loop. What a loop is a piece of code that will continue to run until we tell it to stop. Now you have to be careful with loops because sometimes they will run and run and run and they will never stop. This can crash the browser. If this is PHP, this can crash the server. It probably won't, but it'll probably just stop running. But it can have negative effects like that, and that's not ever what you want. So our first loop is a for loop with increment, and it has three sections. It has the counter variable, it has the condition, and then it has the counter variable increment. So to break this down, we use for, just for, and then we have parentheses. Inside of parentheses is our first one, that's our counter variable. That's our condition, and this is our counter variable increment. Typically, we use the variable I, and that just usually stands for integer, just because it's adding 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, and it's going to keep doing that. So we declare our integer, or our counter variable. We told it that I is equal to 0. Then we have our condition, and our counter variable, our condition, and our counter variable increment are all separated with semicolons. Because we're not making a list, we don't use a comma. We use a semicolon because we're running three different processes here. So we have the first one, counter variable. We have our second one, that's our condition. And then we have our third one, and that's the variable increment. Always run this script as long as I is less than 5. If I is to be greater than 5 or equal to 5, then it's going to stop running the script. And after every time this loops through and it goes on to do it again, we're going to add one more to I. So on our second round, I would actually be equal to 1. And then the next round would be 2. Next round would be 3, and then 4. And it would stop there because if I was equal to 5 and it's only supposed to run while I is less than 5, well, I is greater than 5, so it's not going to run anything. And what this would display is looped 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Now also note that you can use the I integer inside of your for loop, and it will change every time, because we wrote here looped I times, and then we just added an HTML line break. So this one started off as 0, because that's what we told it to. At the end of the first one, it incremented. I++ is now 1. So our second run is equal to 1. Once you think you have that down, then we can start to actually loop through variables. For groups are very, very useful, but they're very numerically dependent, where it will run our code X amount of times, and it will only run it that amount of times. Here is where we will learn how to incorporate our arrays into a loop. The syntax for this is for variable in array, and then our code. So if we have 5 items in our array, it's going to loop through this 5 times. So let's look at how this works. We have variable myArray is equal to a new array, Audi, BMW, and Benz. So our first array here says for v, and that's what we declare. This is our new variable that we make just now. And I just wrote v for value. I'll even write that. V is equal to value in myArray. So these two match because you're looking at the array. Then we just told it to write value and then conjugate a line break in there. Well, what that's going to do is that's just going to give us our index number, and that's not very useful because all that's going to write is 0, 1, and 2. Not that useful. That's where we get into the second for loop. V in myArray, we know what the index numbers are now. First time it runs this is going to be 0. Second time is going to be 1. The third time is going to be 2. And luckily, myArray is not changed at all, so we can still use it inside the loop. And here we wrote document write myArray. Instead of an index number, we have our variable. And our variable changes from 0 to 1 and then 1 to 2. First time this runs is going to run myArray 0 conjugate br. So myArray 0, this is the first one, it's going to write Audi. And then it's going to run number 1. BMW, and then it's going to run number 2, which is Benz. Now let's look at what the example shows below, and yes, it displays Audi, BMW, and Benz. So to recap on this real quickly, The first loop gave us the index number for my array. Well, we can't really do much with a number without the array name, and because the loop leaves the array name alone, which is my array, we can still use that in conjunction with the index number. So my array, we just added the variable in there, and that changes from 0 to 1 to 2. So I have an assignment for you, like all assignments, and there will be more through the rest of the course now, just because some things are getting more complex, and I think it would be a great benefit to you if you did these. But they are optional. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. You don't have to hand it in or anything. This is purely for your practice, for your understanding. So first, write a for loop that automatically increments itself. What we mean is just like this. Just write something similar to that. You can pause it here and copy this over and then try writing it yourself. As long as you understand it, that's all I ask. Then once that's done, write an array with at least 3 values, and you should be able to do that. We have that here. We have variable myArray is equal to new array, 1, 2, 3 values, and then write a for in loop that displays all the values of your array. Remember, v was our value, and our value was our index number. So we have 0, 1, and 2. That's not going to return what we want. That's just going to return 0, 1, and 2. What I want you to do is I want you to try to get it to write Audi, BMW, and Benz, or whatever your 3 values are. And once you're able to do that and fully understand how everything works with it, then feel free to move on. Or, if you don't want to, you don't have to do this. Again, this is just for your practice. I want you to get the best understanding that you can.